we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. As usual, it's me, Jake Baldino, and today we're talking about the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. We've been playing these non-stop since they went live, and we've got some info for you. This is a long-rumored re-release of the classic Grand Theft Auto games that really changed the world of gaming, and it's got some good tweaks. It's got a couple things it's missing, a nice new coat of paint, some weird visual glitches, and some issues, and yeah. Now, it's worth pointing out that this is not a complete remake. Set your expectations. It's a remaster. It's an updated, nicer looking, and more convenient version of the original that still feels old in some spots. Yes, I'm bummed that Rockstar delisted the original versions of the games so you can't buy them anymore. But I think what we have here is, if you're interested in it, a decent way to experience the classic games. They're like you remember, for the most part, except for a few things I'll explain. But it's also a good enough representation for a new generation of people to play it who never got to.
But we think for most people, for people who play these games a lot or you experience them a lot, this feels like it did need some more time in the oven. The answer for the whole thing is a bit more complicated. This is going to be a divisive one.
Now, whether you think it's worth the money or maybe you don't want this because you're mad that Rockstar still isn't giving you Grand Theft Auto 6, that's up to you. I can't really move the needle there. But putting that stuff aside, let's just dive into this product. We've got a lot of gameplay footage for the game on different consoles and platforms for you to see, and all of this is spoiler-free. So first, let's talk about the biggest upfront upgrade, the visuals. A lot of this is going to be down to personal taste and preference, specifically with the art style. It's subjective, so keep that in mind. But the facts first. These are the original games, but with new, nicer, higher resolution textures, new lighting systems, vastly better particle and weather effects. Cars look way better. They're shinier with better reflections. Characters and objects look just kind of updated, like they filled in the blanks with the old graphics. There's a bit more to them in all cutscenes too. But generally, visually, I think in most instances, it looks really good. There are some caveats, but at the very least, in terms of translating the old into somewhat new, but like you remembered, I think they mostly made the right decisions. I found myself sometimes going, wow. Some of it looks good. A few things look not so good. Do you want more? I mean, maybe you'll get it with mods again eventually. San Andreas has some really killer lighting during the day that can make things look pretty modern, while Vice City just seems to have gotten the most care here. The colors are freaking absolutely amazing, and the game just looks and feels a bit fresher but familiar. Some characters and things have a bit more of that cartoony look that the old games were going for, but now, less muddy and a bit more fully realized. Now, again, that's a matter of personal preference. A friend of mine thinks the main characters look weird, and I just disagree. I think they look cool. But there are some side characters that look kind of jacked up, though, I will say. I don't know what happened. They will be memed a lot. But once you start moving and once you start playing, this really is still the old Grand Theft Auto games, meaning characters still get in the cars in that same goofy, aggressive way. They still have those crazy, jerky jump animations, and shooting still looks a little awkward. More on that in a bit. Now, on PC, it has DLSS support, and on the next-gen consoles, it's, to quote Rockstar, 4K up to 60 FPS. Now, it's got two modes, of course, prioritize resolution or prioritize frame rate mode. We've seen this in a lot of other games on newer consoles, and it's all fine and dandy. There's not a massive compromise in cool visuals between the two, except for one game. GTA 3. GTA 3 overall seems like it got the least attention. You'll see that be the theme here. I know it's the oldest and the hardest to fix, but there's tons of weird glitches. We had a few crashes, and there are a lot of visual bugs and stuff that flip-flops weirdly depending on if you're in frame rate mode or fidelity mode. Lighting can get really weird and inconsistent, and the rain effects are downright hard to look at. I can't believe these are in the game. It actually kind of made two of us here kind of feel woozy after staring at it for too long. The frame rate also dipped here and there and was not rock solid, which is something I really was not expecting for an updated version of a PS2 game. This stuff should be watertight. Thankfully, though, so far, San Andreas and Vice City seem to be much stronger overall. The frame rate on frame rate mode maintains a close to solid 60, except for the occasional stutter. That's still a bit more than I was hoping, but I'm just pointing out stuff that was noticeable to our naked eye. It seems mostly smooth. This also goes for the last gen version as well. It looks a little more framey, but it ain't bad at all, and it looks okay. We tested out the PS4 version on a base model PS4 Slim, and we'll have some gameplay popping up in this video here so you can compare. Now, the PC version, some quick notes. PC started very promising with San Andreas running between 60 to 80 FPS in 1440p with ultra settings, which doesn't sound great for a 17-year-old game on PC with a Ryzen 7 3800 and a 2080 Super, but it isn't terrible either considering the upgrades and changes. Still, we think it could use a bit more optimization. Still, the game is totally enjoyable, but like we said earlier, there's more problems in the GTA 3 version. The game runs seemingly for us with a performance loss of like 30 to 50% in more demanding scenes. We messed with our settings, but still couldn't get it perfect. If you're jumping around between the games back to back, you might notice some stuff. Now, the Switch version is it's actually pretty much what we expected. It's rough. It's kind of like The Witcher 3 on Switch, where on handheld it technically looks decent, like wow, they did it, and seems somewhat playable, but it's just blurry. Now, put that in docked mode on a screen, and it's pretty unacceptable. But again, we have inconsistency between the games. Where I thought San Andreas was blurry but fine, Vice City on Switch specifically was a little choppy in some strange ways. Like you can see it in Tommy's run animation sometimes. I don't know what's going on there, but just know that the Switch version comes with a warning. It comes with the territory of the hardware not being super powerful, but still, it's a facelift of an old game. Now, the gameplay itself, it feels good. It feels largely unchanged, but slightly beefed up in places that count. The games are still good and really fun, specifically San Andreas. It's all still so great if you ask me. The games have more modern checkpointing and autosaves, so it's way easier to restart a mission if you fail. The older games were notorious for this. You would do a longer mission and you would fail right at the end, and it sucks. And in some ways, it's a little better here. There's now a more modern GTA-style weapon wheel and radio station wheel, and it works perfectly. You can still swap weapons the old-fashioned way by just mashing the button through them all, or just hold it and bring up the weapon wheel now. And mini-maps are updated as well with like fresh navigation and stuff. The control layout is more Grand Theft Auto 5 style, and the aiming and shooting has been updated as well. The targeting style was said to be like Grand Theft Auto 5, but not quite. This is not the control upgrade you were possibly looking for. Like I said at the start, it's still the same game here, with the same awkward combat that we enjoyed back then. Now you can just hold the left trigger and lock on and aim a bit quicker and more naturally, and in a way that makes it feel more in line with a regular third-person shooter, but movement is awkward, the character's arm can sometimes flail about, and shootouts are still mostly awkward. It gets better by game, just like it did back in the day. 3 was rough, Vice City was better, San Andreas was pretty good. So the update makes aiming and shooting a little easier and cleaner, but the combat can still look a little awkward. Just know that. But at the very least, it's easy to pick up and doesn't feel as archaic. And thankfully, guns still have the same punch. Swinging a bat or a melee weapon is still just zany and goofy, and the games still have the challenging spots. Same goes for the driving. I know people are very particular about the driving in between these games. I don't want to get too deep into it, but it seems like they didn't really mess with anything. But there are still the differences in feel between the games. Also, we got to acknowledge the music. These games are known for really embracing the spirit and culture of their respective time periods, and with that came some incredible licensed real-world tracks, most notably San Andreas and Vice City. Unfortunately, there are some missing tracks. Now, if you played earlier re-released versions of the games from a few years back, you might already be aware of some of the tracks missing here. Some are whatever, and some are really noticeable. There are still tons of tracks, and they're seemingly higher quality now, but the missing tracks are a bummer. I'll link a source in the description below that outlines what what songs are in and what aren't, just so you know. Now, this is one part Rockstar not getting the rights to use these songs, but it can also very well just be some of the music labels and artists saying no. It happens sometimes, and it sucks for us, the people playing and buying. It's not stripped down super hard by any means, but I got some favorites that didn't make the cut. Now, still, if you've never played these games, it's worth pointing out that they're still fun, still worth playing, and cool if you like gaming history. GTA 3 changed everything. It feels a little generic now, but the sarcasm is still pretty good, and at the time, it was so unique. Vice City injects that 80s neon fun stuff and introduced a whole culture of kids, myself included, to cool 80s stuff. And then San Andreas just kind of blows everything out of the water with more gameplay elements and an absolutely insanely massive open world, along with some really cool West Coast hip-hop stuff. I still love these games, and even with the warts on this version, it doesn't bother me too much once I turn off my critical gamer brain. Still, it's important. It's going to be different for everyone. I do really still wish this one had more time in the oven. I know they were trying to hit an anniversary release, but some elements just feel a little bit too messy or undercooked, you know, from some optimization stuff to some weird visual glitches. I do wish there was a little more care on everything because these games are so important, but I don't hate it or anything, and I've been having a ton of fun playing through these games. It's been absolutely nonstop since we downloaded them, and although we have these complaints that we wanted to highlight here, we're highlighting them because we still love Grand Theft Auto games, and we're still planning on seeing these games through to the end. But you know how this goes by now. I give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, and now we want to hear yours down in the comments. What are you thinking? Also, which one are you going to jump into first? Are you waiting for a sale? Do you think this is too expensive? Do you think this is just fine? Let us know any of your thoughts. Have you had any weird glitches and issues? Are we being overly sensitive? Do you miss some missing songs? There's a lot to talk about with this one, so let us know. If you enjoyed this video though, and maybe it helped you out, maybe steered you in a direction, clicking the like button helps us. I think YouTube's getting rid of the like button. I don't know anything anymore.
But hey, we're GameRanks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.